Okay, to start off, do you want to share like your background in education, like your experience? You can say your name, yeah.
Alright. Name's Kristen Brown. My students call me Miss Brown. My background, so I went to school at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and got my bachelor's in elementary education, and then I was like, I think I'll do special ed, so then I got my master's in special ed from the University of Kansas, and I taught there for a year in a middle school. I was a functional life skills teacher, and I had grades 6 to 8, so I had really severe kids, like cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, severe autism, ID, so I had like an ILS class for DC.
Right.
I did that for a year, and I could have stayed there forever because I love that school so much. But I didn't want to live in Kansas. So I came back
Makes
home, and I actually taught in the district where I grew up. And the principal at the school I worked at was the dean at the middle school when I was in middle school, which is really
cool.
weird.
So you have some connections.
Yeah, so I worked in a autism classroom for grades 3 to 5 for 3 years. Also loved that school. Didn't love the area I was in because, like I said, I grew up there. It's very suburban. I didn't want to live there. And then I got a job here at DC in a pre-K autism class, and now I'm here.
Nice. I do have a question. So you got your undergrad in elementary ed.
Mm-hmm.
What motivated you to go into special ed?
So 2 things. One of them sounds really cliche, but first of all, I got my first experience in special ed when I was an undergrad. I used to volunteer before I even got into the School of Ed. I volunteered all through freshman and sophomore year before I started student teaching at high schools and elementary schools in the Chapel Hill area, and that's where I first got I like this population. I like working with them, and I ended up getting a job. I think it was going into my sophomore year of college at this camp in my county, a camp for kids with special needs, and I worked that camp for 5 years.
Oh, cool.
And that camp is really what did it for me. I was like, this is what I want to do. Because I don't know anyone, people in my family are affected by autism, but I found that out after I started teaching. I had no idea. But I just feel like that's just what I was called to do. I feel like when I went to that camp, I was supposed to be there, and I was supposed to do it, and supposed to want to go to special ed. So that's how I got there.
Cool, that's awesome. Out of all the grade levels, since you kind of had a mix, which one is your favorite? And it doesn't have to be where you are now.
I like them all for different reasons. I like middle school. I don't want to say the best. I'm not going to say I like it the best, but we did fun stuff. How my classroom was set up, it was kind of like a room. It really wasn't that big, to be honest. It was a room inside the library, but we had a kitchen in our room.
Oh, cool.
So we got to cook all the time, and we worked on it was a life skills class.
Right.
So our kids would come in, they'd make breakfast in the morning, they could make lunch if they wanted to.
Cool.
We did cooking.
Lots of hands-on.
Mm-hmm. Literally, they'd be they wanted to come because they're we get to make, teaching them how to do waffles. Stuff that they could make at home, the toaster waffles or whatever. Just working on skills they could then do at home. So I liked that class because we did stuff like that.
I mean, you had the materials.
But then I really liked my 3rd to 5th grade autism class because they were so cute. But I just liked the curriculum. We had alternate we had it in Kansas too, but I like the standards. I like elementary school standards, and I liked adapting stuff for my kids in that grade level. And then I like pre-K because once again they're super cute. But in pre-K you can see, I feel progress quicker.
Okay.
They come in and you see it very quickly, whereas I feel sometimes when they get older you don't see it as fast. It's a bit slower.
Okay, that's really cool. So we went through that. What special education strategies and techniques have you used or do you like to use with your students? I guess maybe talk about ones that you used in the past with the older grades and then ones that you use now.
Okay, my older grades, I feel first of all, I taught older grades. It was my first year teaching, so I didn't know what I was doing. But
all about trial and error.
It was a lot of trial and error. I know I tried out some task analysis that first year. A lot of positive reinforcement. That's just all the way across the board for all my kids. I got into the autism sector. Applied behavior analysis was really big, and so that's kind of my focus. I think has been the past few years. It's just getting better and more well versed in that. We do, like I said, reinforcement in my classroom. We do backwards training, forwards training, natural environment teaching. One of my centers is discrete child training. Token boards I used in my old school. visual schedules, lots of visuals.
Yes.
Like my whole room is like a visual for everything on all
Yeah.
the doors, on everything.
And that benefits your high and your low kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like my old class, I had more rigid
Mm-hmm.
students who like really needed that schedule. It's like, okay, what are we doing?
Right.
Trying to anticipate the day.
Very much on a schedule routine.
Very much routine oriented. This year I have one student who is very strict on his schedule, and the other ones are very flexible. So like we have it, and sometimes if kids are having like, we use them every day, but they don't always like need them. Like they're not like hooked to them.
Gotcha.
But it's just a good resource to have just in case like
Yeah,
a kid is having
back up.
tough time transitioning off of something, and also it just helps with anxiety too. A lot of kids have like school anxiety,
Right.
so they can anticipate their day. Like, oh, I have this today.
Yeah.
Like,
This is coming next.
even though our schedule is pretty routine every day,
Right.
but like specials are different, and then
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, ooh, like they
if
can
there's
be
a
anxious,
sub or if like you guys have something inside the classroom
Yeah.
as opposed to going to somewhere. Gotcha.
So yeah, a lot of schedules, and then also too like in discrete trial training, like teaching like little steps first, and then making it
Right.
into bigger things. Hand over hand, different prompting, gestural prompts, partial verbal, full verbal, echoics,
Mm-hmm.
all that good stuff.
What are
Like if I say bat,
right.
I don't know why I said bat. Say whatever.
Right, or like
say
copy.
Yeah,
Okay.
copy me. Like say what I say, basically.
Got it. How do you find it challenging to work in a self-contained classroom where some of your students are really high and some of your students are really low? Or do you use that more? I guess maybe you might use it as like those higher kids being an example and having them like model a lot of things or be like, let's try to, copy those students.
So in
Do you
my
find it-
last job, I had my higher kids weren't in my room as much.
Okay.
So they were in my room. I would say, I think to be in self-contained, you have to be like 50% of the day or something like
Right.
that. But I think they were kind of like borderline, like they spent a lot of time in gen ed, and then they would come to me kind of like for pullout essentially, and like behavior management. But it's definitely hard when you're having to differentiate. Like this one kid, the student I'm talking about, he was on grade level, but he was in my room, and he was on an SOL or park track. Like that thing went up. I don't know. It's okay.
Okay.
And then the rest of my kids were all on alternate assessment, which in Virginia is called VAP. So that was challenging, like trying to get stuff ready for him. And then my other kids who weren't even like on the same.
What did your support look like in that classroom? Did you have
I had two assistants. But the thing is, that year was really good because one of my assistants was also in school to do special ed.
Oh, cool.
So she was very helpful, and kind of like helped me
her
with
more.
I could give her more responsibility.
Yeah.
So like she would help me plan for him, and she was also she kind of did the same track as me. So she did elementary ed and was getting her master's in special ed. So she had a really good foundation on like the curriculum for gen ed. But like now all my kids are assessed on the same assessment tool.
Right.
But there's still like there's 3 levels to it, and I have kids in all 3 levels. But I think it's a little bit easier to plan for me in pre-K because of my center rotation I do. So it's like when they come, usually for my center I get one at a time, so I can really individualize it per kid. And
That's
then
really nice to have.
Yeah, and then the other 2 centers, I've broken it down now where like I have I hate to say like lower kids, but like my early learners in one center, and then my like emerging learners in another center, so I can differentiate it that way, which helps.
I guess it's really easy to work one-on-one with a student rather than have to have like a big group and be like, okay, you do this.
I mean, we still do group stuff too. So like at the end of the day, we do a group.
Yeah, and then you do the morning meeting.
And we do morning meeting as a group, but the expectation within both of those whole group times is different. Like one of my kids, his expectation is just to sit in his seat, and the other one's expectation is for them to sit in their seat and put things on the board, sit in their seat and answer questions.
So it's just like differentiated pretty much for everyone.
Yes.
I guess going off of that, how do you motivate your students? And I think it's really hard for the preschoolers since they're so young that it's just like hard in general, even if the student is gen ed or special ed, to motivate, such young kids in general. But what do you guys usually use? Or what are your strategies to motivate?
I think
or persevere through hard tasks?
So it's definitely dependent on different kids. But a lot of times in self-contained specifically, you'll see that kids are not intrinsically motivated, that they rely on external motivation.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, I did this job, I feel good about it. It's
Yeah.
like, I did this job, now what do I get?
Yeah.
So we use a lot of like edibles in my classroom, really small like little pieces of, this is a healthy school,
Yeah.
but we don't use,
But I guess for self-contained, it's different.
it's like we use like fruit snacks,
Yeah.
goldfish, Oreos.
You guys use the iPads sometimes.
The iPad sometimes, different toys, like if
Yeah.
the kid likes a certain toy, well, like for example, when we wanted to get...
Please find the interruption with the driver of a Toyota.
That's my
Tag FN2411. Please move your car. You're blocking somebody. Again, will the driver of a silver Toyota FN2411. Please move your car. You're blocking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So like for things like sitting on the toilet. I
Yeah.
had 2 kids come in this year who were terrified of the toilet. So that was
Oh,
like
wow.
a persevere type of
Right.
moment.
Yeah,
for them.
seriously. I mean, for that
And
level,
so
yes.
what we did was we found what was like the highest motivator for them, which at the time for one of my kids was his talking tablet. So the only time of the day he got the tablet was when he sat on the toilet.
Gotcha.
Same thing for another kid. He really likes these certain songs. So when we were first getting him to sit on the toilet, he got to listen to these songs only if he sat on the toilet. So this depends on the kid, but definitely like using toys and different foods and
Yeah.
asking their parents to like
Right. Like
stuff
what?
that,
Yeah.
like doing a reinforcement survey and sending it
Yeah.
home. Like what do they like?
Right.
You can make it in order. And then sometimes too, kids like sensory things. Like I had a kid in my old school who would do anything for a hug or a tickle. Like that was his
Wow.
thing. Or a squeeze. He liked
Yeah.
to squeeze his head.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess whatever works. If
Yeah.
that was something that worked for him.
He would do anything, like literally, like whatever you want. Like I just, and I had one kid one year who worked for lotion.
Oh.
He would do his work, and he wanted like a little drop of
Maybe
lotion.
like the sensory with that.
Oh yeah,
I did work with one student who likes scratches. So we
Yeah.
would like scratch his like the
Mhm.
sensory part of it, or like rub his arm and stuff. So I guess I can see the different
like a brush.
incentives. Yeah,
they
for
like that
sure.
stuff.
What's your collaboration with general ed teachers? I know some of your students right now do inclusion. If you want to elaborate more on that,
So this year or like in general?
it can be in general, or you can use specific examples.
My first year teaching. So all my kids, except for like 1 or 2 of them, went to gen ed classes.
Okay.
They would go to like specials and like history or specials in science. And that year it was a lot of like, okay, what are you guys doing? What do I need to do? How can I adapt this?
Yeah.
I had really good I had like 5 assistants that year.
Oh, wow. They just like showered you
I
with
had a lot.
assistants.
Because I had 2 of my kids at 101s, I think, and then I had like 3 for my
Oh,
like
okay.
I had a lot though. I also had 3 different grade levels, so a lot of whenever they would go out, everyone had someone with them. So a lot that year, my assistants would help. I'd say, I had this one assistant who was really good at science, so he would like adapt the science stuff for me. But it was just like a TA, me, gen ed circle
Right.
of collaborating and just making sure we're on the same page, knowing like what was happening. We have a test coming up. We adapt that test. Sometimes the teachers had adapted tests from previous years,
Oh, cool.
tweaking them to use for the students. Yeah. It was actually that year was really good. It was like,
I mean, it sounds like it is.
and
You
it was
guys
so
were
positive that it
communicating.
like gave me like a good start for like
Oh.
doing it in the future. My school before, same thing. Like everyone, like my kids weren't. I had that one student who
Mhm.
went out, but my other ones didn't go out as much. They usually just went for specials.
Mhm.
But even to like the specials teachers, it's like, like what can I do to help this kid
Okay.
with this?
So your gen ed teachers that you have worked with in the past have been pretty open and flexible.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like your experience here working with the
Same
gen
thing.
ed?
I really like. I know people have like horror stories of like
Yeah.
collaboration. I don't have any horror stories. I had one teacher who I just feel like didn't really like get my kids,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't like serious. She just
Right.
It was just kind of like, like what do I need to do? I didn't realize I needed to do that type of thing. Not
Yeah.
like I don't want to. It was like
Right.
I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I do feel like a lot with the gen ed teachers, like a lot of it is that they don't know and that
Mhm.
they're just not used to having that typical behavior or
Yeah.
that typical student in their
Yeah.
classroom with specific needs. So
Yeah. And then here too, I have 2 pre-K 3 kids that go across the hall, and I mean it's pre-K, so it's not really a lot of planning. It's
right.
like, okay, we're coming over at this time.
Yeah.
We're gonna play.
Since it's like a play based curriculum, yeah.
The same thing. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
With my
bless you.
pre-K 4 kid, that takes a little bit more planning, just because he has some behaviors in that room, so we have to kind of work that out.
Right.
But the teacher, literally every time I come to her, like, hey, can we do this? Hey, let's try this. Or she's like, hey, this is not working. Like,
Okay, so she's pretty
Problem
receptive
solving.
and gives ideas.
yeah, she's
That's
cool.
good.
She's great.
So you've kind of always worked with gen ed teachers across the board.
Yes. And good ones. Like,
That's good because sometimes gen ed teachers aren't as willing
No.
to work.
Knock on all the wood in the room.
right.
I've had good experiences with them.
This question is a little bit off topic, off of the inclusion debate, but I wanted to know what you thought about like teacher evaluations, especially on like the special ed end, since it's a little bit different, or they have different expectations for special ed, but the grading is,
Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a proponent of the evaluation cycles, mainly because I guess being like in self-contained, I think it's different than like, what is it called here? It's not called CrossCat. What is your job called?
like resource.
Resource. It's different than resource too. It's like I have these set of kids, the small set of kids that I'm
Mhm.
responsible for. They are not doing whatever the grade level
Right,
is. Like in pre-K, the curriculum right now is Tools of the Mind.
right, like a play
My
base.
kids do not do Tools of
Right.
the Mind. So
It's like kind of weird because you guys don't really have like the self-contained classrooms don't have a curriculum.
right.
That you guys
Right.
make your lesson plans based on like their IEP goals
Right.
and like what they should be
Right.
doing, like
So,
life skill
like,
wise.
The essential practices or whatever for
Right.
DC, when you look at those, I'm always like, I don't
Like
know
a
how to do that in
rubric.
my room.
Yeah, it's like hard to implement
Yeah.
those things. Okay.
So I think that part, I don't want to say it's unfair. Actually, I do want to say, I guess it is unfair.
yeah,
Like, if they're going to have, like, CES and ILS, and you know those classrooms look different than the pre-K class
Right.
and the first grade class and the second grade class, like, there should be essential practices that cater to
Yeah.
those classrooms. And in my experience, I have not, in any of the districts I've worked in, we've never had anything that caters to a self-contained
Special ed,
classroom.
yeah.
But, I mean, having a background in elementary ed, I know a lot of those, like, I know the essential practices are,
Right.
and I have a good foundation in it, so I try to incorporate as much of it as I can to my
Right.
classroom, as much as is appropriate, but I
Mhm.
still feel like I probably fall short in a lot of categories because...
Yeah. I also think that like our admin is pretty like aware that
Yes.
like the self-contained classrooms and even like some of like the resource, like I would say resource is probably closer to the essential practice, like
Yeah.
the rubric, but like still like I feel like they are like, well, I kind of saw this by
Yeah.
doing, like they will like make like exceptions,
Yeah.
but I agree, I do feel like
I mean, I
it
don't
needs
put,
to be just
I don't put a
changed.
lot of weight in it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I always get good scores. I'm like, yeah, that's
Right.
great. But at the same time, I'm just like, I know I'm a good teacher. I see my kids making progress.
Right, and I feel like that's only
And that's my intrinsic motivation to
Yeah.
keep doing my job because I see that the fruits of my labor are,
yeah,
they're working. So
yeah, I agree. Is there anything else that you want to share?
I want to share anything.
Or like anything that we talked about that you wanted to add on? Those are the questions that I had for us, but
I feel like I don't know if I have anything else I want to share. No?
okay. Well, thank you for letting me interview you.